The first thing I noticed entering my parents' house was the smell of roasted turkey mixed with judgment. Heavy, familiar, unspoken. My name is Elena Parker. I'm 32 years old. That Thanksgiving, my family thought I was still a failure. "I'll take your coat," my mother said, brushing past me. Her smile was tight, scanning for someone more impressive. At the table, my father cleared his throat. My sister, Claire, sat near her fiancé, Ethan, the billionaire everyone whispered about. Calm, confident designer suit. "So, Elena," my uncle said, "carving turkey like a weapon, still freelancing?" Claire smiled, not kindly. "She doesn't like to talk about it," she added. "Elena's always been private. Failure. That's what they meant." They laughed softly. Controlled. Polite cruelty. "And since you're the only one not hosting," my mother said, sliding a wine bottle toward me, "why don't you pour?" The table went silent. Not a request. I picked up the bottle, pouring wine into glasses always full for them, never for me. Each pour deliberate, confirming my place. When I reached Ethan, his hand twitched. The glass slipped. Shattered. No one laughed. He stared at me, no, past me, like he saw something impossible. "President?" Every chair froze. Every fork paused. My sister blinked, confused. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I set the bottle down. For the first time that night, no one was smiling. "So tell me, what would you do if those who humiliated you suddenly realized they never knew who you really were?" It wasn't always like this. Growing up, I was the quiet one, Elena Parker, 32 now, but back then invisible. My parents never hid their favoritism. My sister, Claire, golden child since birth. New clothes, private tutors, vacations I could only dream of. Me? Scholarships, part-time jobs, living in a cramped apartment above a laundromat. I had learned early. No one was coming to save me. But I believed in myself, quietly, stubbornly. Every rejection, every smirk from my family only sharpened me. Thanksgiving had always been a reminder of their approval, what I lacked. Each year, a subtle competition. Who got praise, who was ignored. And Claire, she thrived on it. Every eye on her. Every compliment for her accomplishments. I sat, clapped, smiled. Practiced my part. Then came the final blow. Last year, my parents dismissed my promotion at work. "It's nice, Elena, but you'll never match Claire," my mother said, voice syrupy but cutting. I forced a smile. Grit. I kept records, receipts, emails, all small details I knew might matter someday. Grandpa had always said, "Trust but verify. Keep proof. It's your shield when the world doubts you." I laughed quietly that night alone, a bitter, private laugh. I had a plan forming in my head. A quiet, controlled plan. Not revenge yet. Just preparation. They thought I was beneath them. They thought I would stay that way. But now, at this dinner, after Ethan's slip, I realized their underestimation was my weapon. So here's my question. How do you fight when those closest to you assume you'll never rise? Ever since I was a teenager, I learned to notice the small things. The whispers, the glances, the documents hidden in piles of paper. My grandfather, the one person who saw me, had always taught me the value of proof. "Elena," he said, "gather every letter, every receipt, every email. One day, it might save you." I laughed back then, thinking it was old-fashioned advice. But sitting at that Thanksgiving table, watching my family smirk and judge, I finally understood. Those years of keeping records, saving emails, tracking investments, they weren't just habits. They were armor. Claire leaned toward her fiancé, whispering. I caught a glimpse of her smug smile. My parents, too, seemed untouchable in their world of designer suits and forced confidence. But I had something they didn't. Awareness, preparation, patience. When Ethan's voice cracked, calling me president, I felt a ripple. It wasn't just surprise, it was recognition. Recognition that I had risen while they assumed I would stay small. That night, my mind raced. How far behind were they in knowing who I had become? How blind had their arrogance made them? I touched my phone, glanced at emails from my grandfather's old accounts, at notes and folders I'd meticulously saved. Every receipt of my career success, every congratulatory letter, every small victory, they were all here. They had underestimated me completely. And that underestimation would be my advantage. So I ask you, when those who doubt you are blind to your growth, do you strike immediately or wait for the perfect moment? The next morning, I woke to messages that made my stomach twist. My family had been quietly plotting, thinking I would notice. Claire's fiancé, Ethan, had only unknowingly exposed their scheme by calling me president. That single word shifted the entire dynamic. I pulled out my files, folders I had organized meticulously over the years. Every promotion, every contract, every acknowledgement of my success, everything my family ignored, was here. They assumed ignorance, but I had foresight. Grandpa had always said, "People underestimate what they cannot see. Document it or lose it." I called my mentor, a retired attorney who had guided me through tricky family situations before. I needed to understand the full weight of what was happening. Every document, every signed agreement, every notarized record, they had twisted, forged, or misrepresented it to gain leverage. My parents had never tried to hide their intentions completely. The emails I uncovered between Claire and Richard, the family lawyer, revealed plans to divert recognition, investments, and even my career opportunities. Their arrogance was astounding. They believed my compliance was inevitable. Sitting there, holding the proof in my hands, I felt something I hadn't in years. Clarity. Their betrayal wasn't about money. Not just yet. It was about control, status, and preserving appearances. I made a choice. Not out of anger, but precision. They had underestimated me. And now, they would learn how consequences felt when the target was prepared, patient, and aware. So here's my question. When betrayal is subtle but calculated, do you respond immediately or do you let patience sharpen your edge? I spent the night mapping everything. Every email, every contract, every subtle manipulation my family had attempted. By morning, a plan was taking shape, not impulsive, not emotional. Strategic. I knew Claire's fiancé, Ethan, would attend another high-profile event the following week. He unknowingly held leverage in that moment. And my parents? Their obsession with appearances made them predictable. I started small. Quietly, I contacted a forensic accountant I trusted. Within hours, every claim they had about finances, assets, and supposed mismanagement was scrutinized. Patterns emerged, miscalculations, intentional omissions, and discrepancies. They had been careless, overconfident. Meanwhile, I set up meetings with key people who had influence over Ethan's business interests. A single call, a casual mention of certain credentials, subtly confirmed my authority and rising power. Every move was calculated. I was no longer the overlooked sibling. I was the observer, the collector of proof, the architect of consequences. Each action forced them into a corner without a single confrontation. That night, I reviewed my grandfather's advice again. Control the information, control the outcome. I smiled quietly to myself. Every shred of documentation, every folder, every email, they weren't just proof. They were leverage. And leverage, when used correctly, was far more satisfying than confrontation. So I ask you, when you hold all the pieces and the betrayers don't realize it, do you act openly or orchestrate quietly for maximum impact? The day came. Thanksgiving felt like a memory, replaced now by the weight of truth and anticipation. I walked into the family estate again, but this time with folders in hand, every document meticulously organized. My name is Elena Parker, 32, and I had grown into someone my family refused to recognize. Today, they would see me clearly. Claire's smile faltered the moment she saw me. My parents froze, expecting the timid sibling who used to comply without question. Instead, I stood tall, calm, deliberate. I started with the subtle reveals. I noticed discrepancies in the financial summaries, I said, sliding one folder toward my mother. Also, Certain documents you've submitted as authentic have been verified as forgeries. Claire gasped, and my father's face drained of color. Ethan's eyebrows shot up, eyes wide. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse loudly. Every statement was backed by records, notarized reports, and professional confirmations. Their plan to humiliate, control, and overshadow me crumbled under the weight of evidence. It was surreal to see them scramble, whispering among themselves, trying to justify actions that no longer had cover. Their arrogance had blinded them. Now, the tables had turned. And I realized something. I wasn't doing this for revenge alone. I was reclaiming control, dignity, and peace. So here's the question. When betrayal is exposed with undeniable proof, do you demand immediate justice or let the consequences unfold while you remain composed? By the end of the day, the atmosphere had shifted completely. My family's arrogance was replaced by tension, confusion, and quiet panic. Every move they had made, every attempt to humiliate me, had been documented and now exposed. Claire's smile was gone. Ethan avoided her glance, understanding finally that I wasn't a sibling to underestimate. My parents sat stiffly, realizing that appearances and control weren't enough against facts, evidence, and preparation. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I handed them copies of all forensic reports, notarized confirmations, and professional evaluations. Each folder told a story of deceit, manipulation, and attempted theft of what was rightfully mine. They read in silence. I watched them crumble quietly under the truth. Every justification they whispered to each other fell flat. Their power had been an illusion. Mine, meticulously built, was undeniable. And just like that, the tables had turned. The inheritance, the recognition, the control, they were no longer theirs to manipulate. I had reclaimed what they tried to take and done it with precision, patience, and dignity. I walked away that day knowing my grandfather would have been proud. My family's betrayal had been painful, but the response, calculated, just, and firm, restored my life. So, here's my question. After exposing betrayal, when power is restored, do you forgive fully or set boundaries and protect yourself forever? Weeks later, life had shifted completely. The humiliation, the tension, the betrayal, they were all behind me. My family had been humbled, boundaries set, and justice quietly served. I'm Elena Parker, 32, and I learned that true revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about reclaiming your life with intelligence, patience, and dignity. Claire avoided eye contact. Ethan was respectful but distant. My parents, silent, understood that their control was gone. The evidence I had collected wasn't just a weapon, it was a shield. It ensured my achievements, my inheritance, and my peace were untouchable. I used part of my inheritance to invest in my career, launch a scholarship in my grandfather's name, and help others who had been underestimated. Every document I kept, every record I saved wasn't for revenge. It was for life, integrity, and proof that preparation pays off. And while my family never fully apologized, I had no regrets. I set boundaries. I established low contact. I knew forgiveness wasn't necessary for peace. Only clarity, justice, and self-respect. Looking at my grandfather's picture on the wall, I smiled. His lessons, his guidance, his foresight, they had given me more than wealth. They had given me strength, grit, and the tools to rise above betrayal. So here's my final question. After betrayal, humiliation, and calculated revenge, do you rebuild quietly, or let the lessons shape the legacy you leave behind?